talk 14-team playoffs. So essentially what's going on here is, this was decided like last week. We just missed it because we didn't have a show last week. But the Big Ten and the SEC are getting the same amount of pay cut percentage based on, 29%, something like that. I should have pulled that up. But yeah, something like that. So about 29% of the revenue. The ACC is getting about 18%, and then the Big 12 about 12%, and then the Group of Five school getting about 5% of that. So this is kind of an interesting situation, especially figuring out, what's fair, what's not fair. Justin, we'll go to you first on this. I mean, overall, do you feel like the distribution of the money for the conferences, with the Big Ten, the SEC getting the same, the ACC getting a little bit more than the Big 12, and then obviously the Group of Five getting the least amount, do you feel like that is fair?
Yeah, I do, because, looking at last year's numbers, there was a combined $3.3 billion between all of them. $853 million went to the SEC in 2023. It was a $50 million increase over 2022. And so each school getting distributed out $51.3 million to each 14. And they netted, they attributed the increase to postseason events, bowl games, investment incomes, and netted about $191 million. And then looking at the Big Ten at $846 million, right there, the same, 853, 846, negligible. Each team getting $58.8 million. Of course, Nebraska, Maryland, Rutgers are still getting partial shares right now. And then next was the ACC at $617 million. And they had to distribute a little less to each school. So in terms of looking at that, they distributed out $37.9 to $41.3 million per school. And the Big 12, $42 to $44 million. But just based on, what we're looking at there, it's evened out proportionally. I think the one thing that we got to take into account is, or one thing that's kind of ironic to me is, we created this 14-team playoff. It's going to continue to change, but this 14-team playoff, because we wanted the Group of Five schools, and those schools to be able to have a fighting chance in the playoff. And now the Group of Five schools are getting like $2 million. I don't even know what they're going to be getting each, but like you said, 5-6%, something like that. And this is just going to continue the separation of the talent between them and the other schools. And so, on one hand, we opened up the playoff for the Group of Five teams, but on the other hand, we handicapped them in a way. If you're not having the revenue, the schools with the more revenue are going to do the best. It's no secret.
Yep. Yeah, I just want to reference these numbers really fast. I got them exact. The ACC gets 17.1%. The Big 12 receives 14.7%, and then roughly 10% will be distributed to Notre Dame and the 64 Group of Five teams. So Notre Dame gets the same amount of money as the 64. That's the number of teams in the NCAA tournament. Well, I guess 68 now. 64 Group of Five teams. Like, that's just absolutely wild.
I thought they got 13 mil.
Who did?
I thought Notre Dame got 13 mil. I guess I was wrong. They were including 18%. That's tough. That's real tough.
Oh no, they each get Notre Dame, or maybe it's not. I'll have to read it more.
Yeah. I can't remember. I think they get 13 mil if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not 100% sure. Don't.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I'll try to look something up for sure, just to be sure. But Zach, your thoughts?
Well, I was going to say, according to SI.com, it's 21. The Big Ten and SEC schools will make more than 21 million per year. Schools from the ACC and Big 12 will receive more than 13 and 12. And I believe because of the association of the ACC, that's where Notre Dame lands. Okay. So that is with the new proposed 14 team playoff. Which, just a real quick aside, another incentive for Notre Dame to join the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I think I am very torn. One thing I'm very grateful for is that it doesn't seem like they're going to adopt the 3-3-2-2-1 model.
Yeah.
Which is like the automatic bids. Because I was very grateful that they included automatic bids with the expansion to 12. But I want automatic bids to be earned with the championship.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be in the thing. And so I'm grateful that they did that. But Justin, you make a really good point. And we already knew it was kind of going towards the big two, but I think this feels like a Band-Aid that we are just very slowly stripping away. And what we're going to have between now and when we get to the big two is a lot of teams getting left in the dust.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why we don't just, it would be painful, but just blow the whole thing up and just do it. But they're not going to. But I think it's going to be a rough couple years, I think, for teams that are, quite honestly, have been maybe in the mix in the top 15, top 20, but don't have the revenue and opportunity for revenue like the teams in the power conferences. And that includes now teams in the Big 12 and most of the teams in the ACC. Because aside from Florida State and Clemson, they're not going to have the same type of support. Now, maybe a school can get their NIL going and get more revenue, but I think it really handicaps schools that don't have the alumni support, have the financial backing, and the TV revenue that they could have gotten. There's nothing there now, or there's not nearly as much as, Rutgers or Maryland or Nebraska. I think that really, really bodes well for those teams in the Big Ten and the SEC. But think of a team like Utah, who we just talked about on this show about 3 weeks ago. Utah isn't going to have the same financial backing. Now, granted, I think their NIL could be really good, but it's going to handicap those schools.
Yeah, I agree.
Justin, we have Mike here. He says, "Hey guys, Justin." He says, "Go Big Red."
Yes,
hey, I'll give you a Go Big Red too, Mike. All right. I'm a Buckeye fan, but I appreciate Nebraska, and then he also brings up what we talked about. Iowa lost Ian Proctor back to Alabama for real money. Yes.
Yep. Appreciate you joining us, Mike. Go Big Red.
Yeah. Yeah, so the other part of this too, guys, right, is that ESPN inks the deal for the college football playoffs to stick with them through 2031 to 2032. I remember that one. But they stick with them until that time. Zach, you said it yourself. We're just inching close and closer to this Big Ten SEC, kind of combo. What's going to basically be like the AFC NFC college football playoffs. We're just going to get there eventually. Why don't we do it? To me, I feel like that's only 2 years away. But with this ESPN deal, do you guys feel like the ESPN, financial deal makes this a little bit stronger to the point where it's going to be 14 teams or more and include all of these teams? I didn't write that down, but I just thought about that. So I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are on if this ESPN contract will delay it, or do you think, ESPN kind of works with it, and as long as they're involved in whatever the SEC and the Big Ten does, that stays? Obviously, if the ACC just explodes and goes away, that's going to ruin things a little bit. But Justin, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah. So, with the ESPN TV deal with the college football playoff, when that was reported, they still had not finalized that. And that was a thing that people were missing. That was not finalized. And one of the reasons why they had the urgency and they got the people together to come up with the 12 and finalize the 12-team playoff model was because ESPN was wanting to know what this was going to look like. And it gave other, networks the potential opportunity to enter the bidding, but ESPN really wanted to know how this was going to be executed and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily know if they're going to do something that would compromise the deal with ESPN. So I would have to imagine, because they signed that 4 days ago, the new agreement.
The ESPN one?
Yeah, I think that was 4 days ago. They signed the new agreement. And so I think ESPN is probably looped into these changes. And so I think there's a lot of cohesion there with the ESPN in this college football playoff, and ESPN has their best, they have their SEC team's best interests at heart when they take this. So they're not going to let that TV deal go for sure.
Yeah, no way. Zach, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think my I don't like it because I would love ESPN to not have control of the playoff. But I think the reality is they're going to be able to influence the sport, and they will do whatever is going to make them the most money.
Yep.
So, and I don't necessarily blame them for that, but I mean, it's why they have a lot of the SEC. Why they're more tied into the SEC is because it does sell. Like a number of those teams are much more nationally are more national brands, and so I think as long as ESPN is involved, I think if the SEC, Big Ten, Big Two becomes the more lucrative option, that's when it will start progressing more for them. But until then, I mean, let's be honest. How many eyeballs are being directed to ESPN because of all this conference realignment? Like, so they're going to let this bleed out a bit, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I see it slightly differently with in terms of that, because one of the things that the SEC, they're right there with Nebraska, the Big Ten in terms of, sorry, I've been talking about Nebraska all day, the Big Ten in terms of their revenue. And it's one of those things where I think, with the TV deals that are in place for the Big Ten, I 100% think that the Big Ten and some of the brands the Big Ten's adding, that the Big Ten will be a more lucrative place to be than the SEC, because I think that the way the Big Ten operates is more as a business than the SEC has in the past. I think that the way the Big Ten carries himself, it's about, they like teams with structure. They like teams with, good leadership. They like teams with good academic standings, football. And I think over time, I think that's going to get the Big Ten more money. I think the SEC, and they even said this when they talked about their revenue increase last year, there was generated, there was more attention generated in year over year than there usually is towards the SEC this past season. And some of it probably has to do with what you're talking about. But I think the Big Ten has just as big of brands. And I do think that, you got Alabama. We don't know what's going to happen with Alabama and stuff like that. But then you turn that over. And so you have a couple schools there and a few schools that also, I believe, were so much reliant on NIL. I don't know if they're going to be able to even have retention of their players with the way this works, and money, come for more money and stuff like that. So I think the Big Ten has positioned themselves in a much better spot. And I do have more visibility being with CBS, Fox, and NBC, because they're going to have Fox Big Noon Kickoff. They're going to have that 2 p.m. SEC game, and then they're going to have the NBC primetime game. So there's going to be a lot of visibility there too. So,
oh yeah, but I should have clarified. I meant between the ACC and the SEC. Not
gotcha. Okay,
but everything you said, Justin, I could not have said it better myself. That's well stated.
Because the ACC did have 617 mil, so it wasn't chump change last year.
No, not at all.
Good points. Good points. Thanks for listening to the Big Ten Huddle. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. If this was your first time listening, we are the Big Ten Huddle. We cover all things Big Ten football and basketball. We have a long episode every Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, all at 9 o'clock. So come in, check us out, get in the chat, let us know what you're thinking. We would love to have you join us and learn more about the Big Ten.